Tim, how you doing today?
Great, Ryan. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm really pumped that you're on the show. I got to finally meet you at an event that we both did here locally in the Twin Cities. And for our listeners, you were on the panel, but for our listeners' sake, can you kind of just go back to the day that you decided to jump into business for yourself? Because it's been quite a while now. So I'm just kind of curious, when did you decide to be an entrepreneur?
Well, it was my dad's fault because he had the entrepreneurial seizure and left a corporate job to start. Actually, bought a small little printing business in the Seven Corners area here locally in Minneapolis, and so I was sort of employed at the young age, I think, of 13 or 14, when child labor laws were not enforced, and learned my first job was the janitor, and then kind of moved into the bindery and did all the jobs in the printing company. So I watched a entrepreneur start from scratch and watched all the good things and bad things that happened. So when I got out of college, I knew that's kind of what I wanted to do, and he brought me on board. So that's how I got started in the family business and the family printing business.
So from so you saw all the good and the bad, and you still decided to do it, which means you are a true entrepreneur when you kind of have that the blindness to all the ups and downs. And I'm just kind of curious, so from starting after college to obviously taking over for yourself, what was the time frame there, and how did the conversations go with your dad?
Yeah, what I did is I joined him right out of college and started as I think the first controller for the company. And what was great about him was he was a sales guy, and he never wanted to be the manager. So, kind of the Michael Gerber E-Myth guy. He was the technician, and the entrepreneur, but he never wanted to be the manager. So he basically said, as soon as I was ready, so I think I was probably 27, he said, take the thing over and start running with it. So, I was way too young. It was sort of trial by fire, but he knew in his heart he didn't want to do it. So I was running the business at 27 years old. So, I ran it for 23 years, and I was in the business, I think, for like 36 years, going all the way back to when I was 13 or 14. And then I bought it in 2001 for him, and I owned it for 15 years. So yeah, I saw him as an entrepreneur. I saw what kept him up at night, what made him excited, and I just sort of learned by watching and doing.
So when you say, 27's pretty sweet age to be able to jump into that kind of responsibility. And when he says take over, define what that means. Is that because you said you bought it in 2001, how did you structure, was it responsibility and roles first, and then figuring out how to buy it second? Like, kind of walk us through how you guys structured that.
So yeah, when I took over in '93, I took over as president of the company, and he kind of gave me free will there. So that was it was almost like a second birth of the company, because I came at it from more of a professional manager level. And so I brought in, back in the day it was TQM, and, when Good to Great came around and Rockefeller Habits, eventually I brought in EOS Traction. So I professionalized the business. I brought in some professional managers to help me run it like a business instead of running it like a family. And it was really kind of the journey there for me, was the ability to take kind of a small business that was running a little bit ad hoc and actually put it into a professional model. And we always acted probably maybe 2 or 3 times bigger than we were. And I just felt like that was, the way to run a great business was to put some process behind some of the madness that happens in a small business.
So what was the kind of the infrastructure that's set up like at that size for some kind of way to benchmark the company when you took it over?
Yeah, so I took it over. We were probably 3 million, and maybe around 20 people or so, 25 people. And then we grew it up. The printing industry was going well there, so we grew it up before we automated and did some integration and some capital expenditures. We probably ran it up to about 80 people at the top, and 11 million. And then as we used technology as print industry kept changing, we were able to get a lot more sales per employee dollar. So then we were probably around that 50 or 60 employees for a lot of years. And so we had a management team, a sales leader, operations leader, and a finance leader.
I mean, it sounds, just from knowing a little bit more about your story, I mean, it's interesting because I just, for the first time, realized that you came in as the controller, and it kind of makes a little bit of sense. Do you think, knowing the numbers and like that and the managerial passion that you have, is that what was kind of the passion for the way you systematize things? I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of automation and leanness and all that kind of genetic makeup in you. I mean, describe kind of your management style throughout the years, and I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, my undergrad was accounting degree, but I was never interested in being an accountant. But I knew that if I knew the numbers, seeing my dad from the sales side, I knew if I knew the numbers that was going to serve me well as an entrepreneur, because he had kind of street smarts, but he didn't really have the accounting background. And my cousin that was older than me told me, he was like 6 years older, he said, an accountant can always become a businessman. A businessman can never become an accountant. And he said, I wish I had learned the numbers. So I did that. I actually took my CPA and passed my CPA, and my roommates thought I was crazy because they're like, you're not even going into public accounting. Why would you take that beating? And I just decided I wanted to have the full spectrum. So I do come at it from a numbers, but actually what happened to me, my management style is people and culture and then numbers. So it's kind of a cool combination because I know the numbers and I know, how to be profitable. And so we were always very profitable as a business, but then I was really interested in using sort of people and employees the right way and building a great culture. So at Western, that was kind of my main passion in owning a business was I wanted to create a company where we could win as a team and we could reward each other as a team. And so I kind of built the culture, and we brought in some of the technical stuff. We brought in lean manufacturing. We brought in EOS traction, but I was always there to sort of help build a better employee culture. So we were 6-time best workplace in America winners, and I really believed that if we had sort of I know we had the hands of the employees, but if we got the heart and the head of everyone together and we kind of rode together, that it could be a great company. And that's kind of what my basis for joining the business and buying the business was. I wanted to have a great company with great people getting great results, and as long as I had that, then I was all in on the business.
So how do you, was there a specific thing that you used to do to tie the numbers and all the infrastructure and automation and operational stuff to the people and the culture? Was there, like, how did you balance those two as you were growing the business?
I call it, somebody gave this to me, I call it sharing the insomnia. So if things aren't going well in the business, we should all be waking up at 2:39 in the morning. And not just me, not just the owner, not just the executive team. And if things are going great, we should all be sleeping in. So sharing the insomnia was, let's share the numbers. I read Jack Spack's book, Open Book Management. And, I was I'm a lifelong learner. So I did all the Lencioni stuff. I did Michael Gerber and the E-Myth and Good to Great. And I kind of knew from studying all that the reality is that we're not going to get very far if we just got one or two people at the top who are doing all the thinking. So I brought that back down and saying, we're going to win or lose together. And so using continuous improvement, some things, we went on an improvement journey together as a company. And at the end in 2016, before I sold it, the employees had done 3,800 improvement projects.
Holy crap!
And yeah, we were doing 400 to 600, and we only had 40 or 50 people, but we were doing 400 to 600 improvements a year, all from employees. And so that's how I kind of married the numbers with the people. Is we knew if we did improvements that the numbers would show up, and we had profit sharing, and we shared the profits. So it was kind of a, we built it together and made sure that if we were winning together, we were sharing it together. And if we weren't, then they knew, because with open book management, I shared top line and bottom line numbers with everybody every month.
So define what 3,800 improvement projects. I mean, what is that? Does that range from implementing an ERP system to giving someone a kudos, or like where does that? I mean, I know that's obviously a drastic example, but like what would you define as those projects?
So our improvements were generally small projects or small improvements, and our philosophy was the smaller the improvement, the better it was, because when you reach for these big projects like that ERP as an example, what happens is not many people can participate. So, or if you make it, where you got to have a project management degree or you got to have an MBA, the people on the floor, on the line are like, well, I can't do that. So if you're looking for $10,000, big improvements, I can't do that kind of stuff. So we emphasized the small improvements. And that way we knew everyone could play and everyone actually could be accountable for making improvements and getting better every day. And so the improvements, an example of an improvement would be, let's say, we have a bunch of, let's say, dull tool bits, and we need to keep them sharp. Well, in the old day, before the improvement, they would just throw them in the drawer. And then when they needed sharp tool bits, they would run around in the drawer for 10 or 15 minutes and try and find one. And the improvement was they just popped up a visual control board on their drill press. And they had a red lane and a green lane, and the green lane had the sharp tool bits, and the red lane had the dull ones. And then the maintenance guy knew, when he was going to have them sharpened to keep the line running. So they could be real simple. They were whatever took your frustration out. That counted as an improvement. So if you're frustrated, instead of complaining about it and going home and looking to kick the dog, pick up a weapon, do an improvement, spend some time and make your life easier. And if they made their life easier, or the department better, or the company better, then we all kind of succeeded. So they were very small stuff. I mean, I remember one, we had like a double door on our dock, and so the paper companies could deliver paper after hours. And so these guys, that were driving the trucks, they didn't really know us, but they would put the pallets against the dock door, not knowing that the dock door is actually opened back towards them. So they would pin it in. And so when our guys would come in on Monday morning or a Saturday morning, because we had a weekend shift, they'd have to undo the whole pallet because they couldn't get a pallet jack through the dock doors. And so the improvement was they just taped out basically an area where the dock doors could swing out, and they just basically said no pallets here.
Yep.
Just simple things. Yeah.
Well, and it's the compound effect too. 3,800 is a lot, and I'm sure things just constantly kept getting better. And so, when you look back, what was? I guess it's two questions. One, before you sold the business, did you have like one thing that you think that you did that you were the most proud of? And then the second part of that question is, did it change with hindsight with when you sold? Like, so was there one project that was just like kind of your guys's, golden goose, and then did it continue to be that one after you'd sold, when that you believe may or may not have impacted your sale?
I think the most proud thing was that we had teams, we had a continuous improvement culture, and so everybody was on a team, and those teams worked together to make improvements. And then we used to, in our employee meeting, we had an all-employee meeting every month. Those teams would get up and basically brag to the other teams their best 3 improvements. And so that would be like my proudest moment, was every month when we'd shut down for 40 minutes and get together, the whole company, having people who really didn't know, who were nervous about public speaking, getting up and kind of explaining their best improvement that they made, and just kind of watching those people grow, both as individuals and as teammates. And that would be, where I knew we were really doing well with the bottom line numbers, because we were very profitable, but I could see it in, sort of the way they carried themselves and the careers that they were building.
That's awesome. I mean, it must have made you feel proud, because you're enabling that kind of culture. And from what I'm from what I gathered too, I mean, you're so people oriented in what you're trying to do to help individuals. What happened to you to think that you needed to sell? What was the triggering event that precipitated this journey that you went on?
Couple of things. Great question. When I was 22, I was a senior in college, and I was taking an advanced business class, and the class was, I'm going to give you guys Harvard Business Review case studies, and I want you to read them and then figure out how to fix this company, and then we're going to share as a group everybody's ideas on how to put these businesses back together. And that was sort of like when I was doing that, I was like, God, it didn't feel like I was studying. It didn't feel like I was working. And I knew right then I always wanted to work with business owners and the business puzzles. And I always had that as an itch. So then I jumped into the business, and I was given the reins to kind of build my own culture and my own company. And I love that. But I always wanted to work with business owners exclusively. And so I joined peer groups. So I've been in peer groups for 21 years. And so I used that as once a month I would get in a peer group, and I'd be around 10 or 12 business owners, and I'd kind of scratch that itch once a month. But as I got into my late 40s, I'd always wanted to do what I wanted to do at 22, but I was having so much fun in the business. And then as I got closer to turn to 50, I said, am I ever going to do this? Am I ever going to go work with business owners exclusively 100%? And so that's kind of what set me off on selling the business and exiting the business and going to work as a consultant and as a peer group facilitator full time.
So, it's interesting that you had that foresight that young to build and continued along. I mean, for decades, working in the business. So obviously, you were getting that itch pretty decently scratched while you're running your own business. Did something get boring at the office? I mean, was it the actual fact that you were turning 50? I mean, was there something that led you to internally reflect like that?
Well, I had a guy in my I was in a national like employee engagement peer group, and a guy that was in my group who was about 10 years older than me. He lived in Hawaii, tough break, and he was a construction guy. And he was 10 years ahead of me, and so he sold his construction company at the right time when he had the right energy, and he went into consulting, and he did a presentation that was called Landing the Plane. And his analogy was, what us entrepreneurs and owners forget is that when we start a business or buy a business, we're taking off in an airplane. And while we're up there, we forget the fact that we're flying a plane, which is the business, and that we're going to have to land the plane. And if we don't plan ahead, we're going to crater it. And so he said, you've got to kind of figure out what you want to do as business owners, because, and I read this somewhere else or heard this somewhere else, that the journey ends not when the journey doesn't end for a business when you become successful. The journey ends when you leave the business successfully. Mm-hmm. And so he said, you can't put a business on autopilot forever. It'll run out of fuel and it'll crater. So I knew I had to kind of figure out, well, I had to listen to kind of my clock. So I think what happened is, I had scratched that itch, but I really wanted to do that full time. And I knew that there was a couple things going on in the business where the real estate, we'd sold the real estate and we were leasing back, and I had a new lease renewal coming up in a couple of years. And I knew if I re-leased the building for 5 years, during that time I was going to have to spend a lot of money on new equipment. And that was going to keep me in for another 5 to 7 years. So I knew if I renewed the lease, I was going to be in for 10, and then I was going to be in my 60s. And I kind of felt like, boy, I might miss my window on getting out on my own. So that was kind of the what got me thinking about, and then his coaching, which is, it's a timing deal. You got to figure out how to land the plane. You've got to have a plan to do it. And so really for me, what happened with me is I had a deadline on renewing the building lease, and that gave me kind of a short time frame, about really 2 to 3 years, to figure out what I was going to do.
Which is nice because you actually have something to work towards, and I think that's what a lot of people struggle with is they're on autopilot, but they have zero idea where they're going to land the plane. They know they may or may not even need to land the plane, but they don't even know where they're going to go. And you've got some foresight, and you had an interesting comment that I really appreciated when you were up on the panel, and so I want to kind of get into your head of like how you were struggling with this, because so now you got this deadline, you've got something to kind of work towards. I'm kind of curious on two things. One is like, where did you start when you kind of became aware of all this, and then when you finally spoke the words in front of your peer group, and why that was so challenging. I know that's kind of two loaded questions. So let's go with actually the second one first, which is just admitting it, that you were going to be selling the business. You said that was such a struggle. Can you explain to us why?
Yeah, so I mean, the analytical part of me, that finance part of me, and the emotional side of me, the culture side of me, or the people side of me, I mean, that's kind of an interesting fight, because the financial guy's saying, hey, we got to take care of ourselves, and the emotional or the people side of me is saying we got to take care of the employees. Mm-hmm. So I was struggling. It was a family business, it was second generation. I knew my kids weren't going to be third generation, so that was easy. But I was having a hard time actually getting there and deciding to sell it. So it was rolling around in my head. I knew I wanted to. I knew there was a window that was coming that would allow me to do it, but it didn't make it easier for me emotionally to make the decision. So I was in my peer group meeting, and we were going through our goals. Every year we have a retreat, and we were going through the goals for the next year, and this was in November. And I'm usually pretty direct with what I'm trying to get done. I have goals that I work on every year, so I'm one of those guys. But I was mumbling around, and finally one of my peer group guy goes, "What are you trying to say?" and I said, and I took a long, deep breath, and I said, "I think I'm going to sell Western." And I had never said it out loud before. And he goes, "Well, yeah, and I mean, we kind of get that. I mean, we know that that's what you're supposed to be doing." And it took me, one of the things I would share with other business owners is it took me, especially family business people, it took me literally a year emotionally to make the decision and to actually start moving down the path. I mean, I spent a year. I had to talk to my mom and dad about it. I talked to my wife and family about it. I had 3 sisters that had worked in the business. No one had been working there, but it was dad's business, and we'd all worked there. My mom had worked there. So, and I had 20, I mean, I was on payroll for 36 years. I mean, that was my whole life. And so it took me a year emotionally just to get clear enough in my head that this was going to be okay. And, my family and my mom and dad said, this is good. Just follow your heart on it.
So, as you're asking these close families and friends, what were the questions you were asking them?
What am I doing? Am I, am I in a midlife crisis? Does this sound normal? I mean, I didn't have anything, my dad was just once he got in the business, until he sold to me, he wasn't going to leave the business. And, so I was struggling with, am I really supposed to be giving up this legacy and the Keran family that had owned it for that many years? So I was just testing the water, saying, am I crazy? Am I midlifing here? What am I doing? And, everyone was coming back to me saying, you've talked about it. We know, look at your bookshelf. I mean, you've got every business book on the planet. You're really a business guy. You're not really a printing guy. And so if that's really what you want to do, because I do have a lot of passion around a lot of things, I said you should just follow your heart on that. So yeah, it helped to hear outsiders say to me, it's going to be okay.
Yeah, I can imagine, because it can be lonely, especially when you're making a very big decision like that. And so after you've kind of mentally made this decision, you've said it out loud to your peer group, what was the first action step that you took? One thing that helped me, and things come into your life when they're supposed to, so I think I was watching or reading when Jon Stewart was
announced that he was going to give up the Daily Show. I think the way he announced it is, this show means everything to me. You, the audience, mean everything to me. But I am a restless host, and you don't deserve a restless host. So, for me, it was like, okay, that makes sense to me because I'm now restless, and my employees deserve, particularly in the printing industry, because of how much change is going on. Mm-hmm. My employees they don't deserve a restless owner. They deserve an owner who's all in to help them. So as soon as I sort of, that was another wake-up call for me is I'm restless now. And that means I'm a little bit dangerous because I'm not all in. I've got one foot out. So I then took that and said, okay, then you got to make your move. And so I sat down with my financial advisor, my CPA, who's really connected into the graphic arts industry, and we drew up a list of people we wanted to talk to. So we never hired a business broker. We never went out on the market. We drew up a short list of friendly competitors that we wanted to talk to about buying the business.
So when you have this list, I mean, was it local competitors? How did you? Because I believe it was you that was talking about being very dialed into. I don't know if it was you or Tom dialed into your trade association, but what? So you said you didn't hire a business broker, but I think wasn't there some sort of experience that you had as you had found out that the way to maximize and keep the employees was the competitive approach? So tell me kind of, as you were making this list and not going down a financial buyer or business broker route, how did you kind of come to this conclusion?
So it was kind of two-part. I went, now we're about 2.5 years away from my renewal decision for the building. And so we went out first and we tested the market. We went out and probably talked to 6 or 7 people on our list and did the non-disclosures and confidentiality stuff. And what I found, what I got back from the first round, we ended up doing kind of this twice, but the first round surprised me. What I heard was we were about $8 million in sales, that we were really too small for a financial buyer to buy a printing business and run it as is or standalone. We talked to people in the industry, and everybody loved the business. It was very profitable. We had great process, we had great people, we had great profitability. But everybody, because of the industry's decline, everybody wanted to roll it in and bring it into their facility. Nobody needed more facility, a second facility. And at our size, what I found out was we were really too small for a strategic buyer to run the business on its own. I also got feedback that, we had these amazing top 5 customers, but when you put it all together, that was probably 40% of our business, and we were customer dependent. And so based on that, we weren't going to be an EBITDA multiple candidate either, because, if one of those big customers had gone away. So I was going to be on an earn-out. So that first market test, we learned that we were too small, that nobody wanted the facility, that because of the industry issues and the customer dependency, that we were really going to be a tuck-in. And so that surprised me, and we came back in and sort of regrouped and pulled back for about 6 or 7 months, and then went back out the second time, really with a better plan, which is we are going to be the best tuck-in that ever lived, and on a 1 through 10, we're going to be at 12 as a tuck-in candidate, and we're going to pick the right culture and the right competitor that we want. And so we went out on the second time with six requirements of a buyer. So it was kind of a flip. We really kind of took the offense and said, if you want to buy us and do the tuck-in, here's the 6 things that we need. And we got all and we got all 6 things. I mean, my CPA advisor that's helped me said, you're never going to get number 6, but I did get number 6. So I'll give them to you quick. So we went out and I said, really what I said was, I'm going to do this as a 50-50 deal. I want 50% of this is going to be financially. I want the earn-out money to work so that I can go do my second act. But the other 50% of the equation is I want the employees taken care of. And I'm not saying that that's the right ratio for anybody. But if my advice to an owner that's thinking about selling is, find out what's important for you and then get in front of that and then make sure you lead with that. So in my case, it was going to be a 50-50 deal. And so the six things were.
And before I interrupt you,
oh, go ahead.
Sorry for interrupting. Is what I was saying is when you're going. I want to go into that. Just one question on the money piece. Did you come up with a net dollar amount, and then anything else after that was the employees, or how did you come up with the balance between those two?
I had already done profit sharing and bonuses, and I felt like I'd done my work there, so I wasn't looking to cut them in on the sale money, but I wanted to make sure that their career. So when I said 50-50, I didn't mean it to be a financial payout. I meant it to be a career payout. I wanted to put them in another great situation for their careers. And I stewardship wise, I knew because of the printing industry and some of the troubles in the printing industry that was kind of my legacy to them, is I was going to give them the best chance as they moved on in their careers.
Well, and I love what you did too, because the one thing that I really struggled with after we sold was that we sold to a local competitor as well, which was they've got a fantastic business and a great culture, but because it was a tuck-in, to use your terminology, there was a lot of redundancies, and like less than half of the people had to really ended up staying, and and we needed that to make the numbers work for us and for the buyer. And so I would have loved to have all of them stay and had jobs, because I wanted the legacy from all the stuff we had built too. So that, I don't know how I would throw that into a ratio, but it was the only way to make it work for us. And it was severely devastating. So like you said, to know what you want and to realize after the fact that our employees were that important to us it kind of sucked. I guess the way to put it.
Okay. Yeah. And I can see that. I totally get that. I mean, we had worked together to build this great business. So I was clear on that they were going to get, from a career point of view, they were going to get taken care of in the deal. So
when we went out, buyer that needed all those employees and all that infrastructure.
Well, what it was we had sold the facility, so the facility was taken care of, which is a big deal. I mean, that can weigh you down big time. So the customers were going to go with the deal, so that's obviously the number one. But we had done such a great job managing our people side of the business that the competitor I sold to had 100 plus employees, and we only had maybe 150, 160, and we had 40. We actually had 44, and we said these other four, we recommend you take these 40 after looking at what they had, and there was a couple of redundancies, but we basically said these 40 will fit well in your operation, and these four probably wouldn't work because of redundancies or whatever. And so they took 40 of the 44. And the punchline there is those other four got jobs immediately. I think everybody was employed. The other four that didn't go had jobs within 2 or 3 weeks. So that was awesome. The good news of that. But the 40 that went, we had done such a great job with training and really coaching employees that we went through one by one with them, and the buyer of the business said, if this is real, I mean, if these guys and gals are that good, we're certainly going to take a look at them, because we need to, we'll take talent. Mm-hmm. And so, the end of that story is it's now, 15 months since the sale, and none of those 40 have been fired or let go.
That's so awesome. Good. I mean, that's major props to you. I mean, that's awesome.
And to them, to our employees.
That's a very good point. Yep.
Because they showed up and, they were fit. I mean, these, if you want to put an analogy with the physical fitness, these guys and gals were working out in the business every day. They had the right attitude, the right skills, the right teamwork. And so when they landed, they looked good. They didn't look redundant.
I love it. Okay, so I interrupted you on your 6. So you had the 50-50, and then there was the other 5?
Yeah, so the six requirements was I wanted it to be locations. So I think you had asked earlier. I wanted it to be the location needed to be close to us, and the reason for that is if the competitor wasn't close to us, we were going to lose employees. Because of the commute going from Eden Prairie to Woodbury was going to be tough, and So that wasn't going to be good for the employees, but it also wasn't going to be good for my earnout. So again, back to my financial and people thing is, I knew if the employees stayed in the saddle, that was going to work good for them and good for me. The number two is they had to be print centric, so they had to be in love with print, because some people are saying I'm getting out of print, I'm going into marketing services, and I knew that if you're going to wander away from what you're good at, the core, that's going to cost employee jobs, and that's also going to cost me on the earnout. The third one was they had to be service oriented, they had to be a sales company. It's really important as the printing industry continues to mature and decline that you're really a service company. So that was there. That also was going to do well with my earnout and with the employees. They had to be bigger, was number four. They had to have a bigger capacity, bigger capabilities. That was one thing we were hitting the ceilings on. We just didn't have all the services to offer. And that was also going to be obviously good for the employees in terms of their future careers. Family base was important to me because I knew they would, that just felt good. I think the employees enjoyed working for a family-based business. And then the sixth one was they had to take the majority of the employees. And so my advisor said, I had you through 5, but you're not going to get 6. And I said, hey, you asked, and that's what I want. So when we interviewed the second list, that's what we were interviewing for. And I remember when we first sat down, like in our second or third meeting, and the actual buyer who bought the business, we showed him our people analyzer, and we showed them all the strengths and weaknesses of the employees. And they're like, well, where'd you get this? And I said, well, we do this every 90 days. And they're like, dang, we should be doing this. but we showed them, everything that they were good at and everything they were cross-trained on. And so like I said earlier, they literally said, we trust this. We love what you've done with your employees. So we're going to hire all 40 of them. And actually the phantom 7th requirement or request from me, I never actually brought it up, but the 7th one was I didn't want to sign an employment contract. But I never brought it up because I knew I was probably going to have to do a year or two. But in the end, because I sold to a competitor who was in our space and understood our business and took the whole management team and took the whole employee team, I just did about 6 weeks of transition, and then I was off on my own.
Wow. So how many people did you meet with to find this perfect match?
On the second round, we had another list of about 5, and I think they were the second people we talked to, and it went really well, and we basically kicked out the advisors after this. I think after the first meeting, we said, we'll call you guys if we need you, and me and the buyer just basically went man on man, and we just worked it out. We figured out what was important to both of us, and we both negotiated a good faith offer, and then we brought the attorneys in at the end and had them button it up.
So in that process, when it's just you two, obviously it feels good, which is super important. I mean, was there a big long due diligence process, or what was the time frame of that whole journey?
It did take us 7 months from sort of that initial meeting to closing. And we were all on the same page, and it still took 7 months. And I was already emotionally ready to go. They were, they wanted us, but it still took 7 months of just doing the due diligence, 2 or 3 months of due diligence, and then the attorneys back and forth, and the holidays got in the way, and so it did take 7 months to sort. But the deal was pretty much cut in the first 60 days.
Was there any surprises as you were constructing like the terms and conditions? You've mentioned earnout a couple times. I mean, I don't know, you don't have to give any numbers, but can you elaborate like on how you got into like the structure of what you put together, and if there was any surprises that you saw as you were going through it?
Once we had gone out the first time and understood that working with my timing of not having to renew the lease, knowing that it was going to be a tuck-in, there wasn't many surprises because on an earnout, I was really going to get paid on the sales that were retained, and the equipment that they bought. So there wasn't a lot of moving parts to the deal because it's like, well, if these customers are good and the pricing is good, then they're going to stay, and if we service them well, it's just going to work. And they're hiring everybody. all of our employees. So there wasn't a lot of surprises because we're really just working off of after closing. I'm going to get paid mostly on the sales retention.
And it was an asset sale, I'm assuming.
Yes.
So you mentioned the kind of the building, and you did some maneuvering with that. Can you kind of elaborate? Because I think in the mid market with a lot of companies around your size, there's the building is a huge piece of the asset and the net worth of the business owner, which is the same thing in our case too. And you did some interesting stuff from the first time you went to the second time. Can you kind of elaborate on that?
So luck is defined when opportunity um, meets preparedness, and so I kind of knew that the itch was getting stronger, but we had the facility, and we own the facility. So me and my family members own the facility, and so the last thing I wanted to do was put my family members in a vacant building, and so we had a local business that was kitty corner from us that wanted to expand, and they came knocking a couple of times and said, we want to buy part of the parking lot, and we told them no, 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 and then as my sort of itch got stronger, I said, well, maybe this would be a way of sort of taking the facility out of this exit equation. And so the third time they came knocking, I said, well, we can't sell you the part of the parking lot, but we can sell you the whole parking lot and facility, and then we'll do a lease back. And they wanted a 10-year lease, and I said, well, no, we'll do the 3-year lease that's remaining, and then I want a 3-year option to renew on my option. So that it was a bit lucky, but if you're thinking ahead and you're looking at landing your plane, and you know what your exit, mine was a 5-year thing. I said when I was 48, I wanted to be out by 53, and I got out at 51, and that facility kind of helped. The facility sale really helped it because if we hadn't done that, I would have. I was the 100% owner of the business, mm-hmm. but I would have had to pay the partnership that owned the real estate. So I would have, that would have been out a lot of money. As it turned out, I wasn't out any money because we timed the lease expiring to the sale of the business. But that was a big deal. If I had not had that flexibility of getting out from underneath the real estate, I might still be working on this.
So thank you very much for clarifying that, and that is just like you said. I mean, it's luck, but you knew where your head was at, so you wouldn't have been able to take that opportunity had you not been prepared. So I 100% agree with you. But when I heard the story the first time, I was actually thinking that. So a lot of people have it rolled under like one corporation or something like that. So when you told the story the first time, I thought you actually just like separated the entities. So when you were saying like you were kind of worried about your lease coming up, I'm like, well, it's your own. You're only negotiating with yourself, so it's really not that big of a deal. But then, no, I totally get it because you were going to have a third party that was going to lock you into your own building or their building
Yep.
for another 5 years. So you're right. You would have been in there for until you're 60 or something like that. So and the industry's changed a lot. So yeah, I totally get the stress that you were dealing with.
Well, I will tell you the blessing in that is, as a small business owner, is that I had a hard deadline. And that was probably the most important thing, yeah. That I had a ticker going on me. And so every month that went by, as I went out the second time, I was probably at about 18 months. And then I was then I was screwing around and, then people were taking time. Then I was at 14 months, and then I was at 11 months, and it was like, okay, now I'm less than a year away, and if I don't get this deal done, I'm going to have to renew the building lease, which is going to keep me in. So it was great to have, not an actual like hypothetical deadline. I actually had a hard deadline where if I didn't have a deal in my hand, I had to renew the building lease.
Yeah, I mean it's a beautiful structure that you put into place, and the reason that you did that too, I just think for the listeners, just to kind of rack back on what you were originally saying, is because you realized it was going to be a tuck under, right? Because in a financial situation on a standalone, the building sometimes is like really necessary to get the deal done because like an SBA loan will be tied to it, and that's what actually funds the deal. But you had already kind of eliminated that decision, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, because there's even more challenges had you needed to sell it to someone else without a building, and it was just going to be a standalone, like another lifestyle buyer or something like that.
Right, absolutely. And a vacant building is financially is not a good idea.
Yeah, for anybody. So now that you're off on the second half of your life and pursuing your passions, is there any regrets that you have or anything that you got from the hindsight that you would have done differently?
No, I miss the employees. I miss that culture, but I know everybody's going to be better off because I was too restless, and you can't be restless in a small business and as an owner, and you certainly can't be restless as a small business owner in the graphic arts industry. So
Right.
I feel good about that. I did my job with as best I could with the employees. I got them into a better, longer term career path. So no regrets there. I guess one of the reasons why I don't have any regrets is the deal did come through perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I got what I wanted financially. I got what I needed. I got all the employees' jobs. So I had some emotional checks on it that everything went according to plan. So there was no missteps there. But I think the other big thing I had was I knew what I wanted to do in my second act, I called it. So I was running this great business with great people, and we were making, really good money. And now I am helping other business owners build great businesses and building, hopefully a better life for them. So my second act was really clear for me, and I moved into it. And so I have something else that I'm passionate
Mm-hmm.
about. And so to me, I don't have any regrets because I'm kind of doing what I was doing at Western. I'm kind of doing it full time, but I'm now doing it with 5 or 10 business owners. So I think it's really important to figure out what you're going to do after, because I sold it at 51, but I know what I'm going to be doing as my second act for the next 20 years. And so that to me is really healthy and keeps me going. Back to the Hawaiian contractor, my mentor, he actually had a third act already planned out. I said, "What?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, I already know my third act." And I go, "Well, the second act is construction consulting." So he's doing consulting for construction owners. And I said, "Well, what's the third act?" And he goes, "You know that guy or gal when you go into the movie theater that takes your ticket and says, 'Hey, hey, Mr. Keran, what movie are you seeing today?' 'Oh, I'm seeing The Mummy.' 'Oh, it's a fantastic remake. I hope you have fun. I'll see you next time.'" He goes, "That's what I want to do. I want to be the guy taking tickets."
That's some serious ambition there. I love it. In this, you hit on a lot of really really good points, and I'm just kind of curious so even though you knew what you wanted, Tim, what's the what was the one thing that helped you the most in the transition in that from being the business owner to the consultant? What was the one thing that helped you re-identify who you were?
Well, that's a big question. I think it's underneath all of that is sort of the passion for getting better and making improvements. And so I knew that, at the end of the day, that's kind of a little bit of my DNA. One of my strongest passions is this ability to make improvements and to want to make things better. And so I think that pulled me through because it was very emotional. I mean, telling employees you're selling it and going through that, transition of moving out of the business that I had been in since I was 13 or 14 years old. I mean, it was, so my anchor, I think, was at the end of the day, I was going to be able to be true to myself, and I was really going to be able to continue doing what I was doing, just in a different way. And so I didn't have a major sort of break in who I was in terms of my personality and my passion.
I love it. True to yourself. I mean, you can tell you're enjoying what you're doing too, which is absolutely fantastic. I'm sure all your customers enjoy it too. What is the best way that our listeners can get in touch with you, Tim?
They can go onto my website. It's altusba.com, so altus.com, or my email is tim@altusba.com. They can find me on LinkedIn as well.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, Tim.
You bet, Ryan. Thank you.